Why would one small kiss destroy an entire marriage? How did a moment of closure end with my husband's lawyer handing me divorce papers at Sunday dinner? I thought it was just a test of my feelings, but it became the evidence that ended everything. My name is Sylvie Anstral. I'm 34, and until a few months ago, I thought my marriage was unshakable. Daniel and I had been together for 9 years, married for 6, with 2 kids, and a life so steady it sometimes felt unreal. People called us the model couple at church, the ones who always showed up on time, who never fought in public. I used to like the way that sounded. Stable, respectable, enviable. But then stability started to feel like boredom, and boredom started to whisper ugly things in my ear. Daniel's always been a quiet man, careful with his words and money, steady as stone. He'd come home, kiss me on the cheek, ask about my day, and tuck the kids into bed. Nothing wrong with that, right? Except somewhere along the line, I started missing the thrill of being seen. Really seen. I blame the routine, the house, the sameness of every conversation. I told myself I wasn't unhappy, just curious about who I used to be before I became someone's wife and someone's mother. When Lorne, my ex from my early 20s, messaged me out of the blue, it felt harmless. Just a friendly hello, a memory shared, a digital echo from the girl I used to be. He'd always had this easy way of making me feel interesting again. I didn't tell Daniel about the messages. I told myself it was because it didn't matter. A coffee catch-up, I said, a chance to get closure, even though I wasn't sure from what. Daniel asked why I seemed distracted lately, and I said, work stress. He believed me, because that's who he is. Trusting, predictable, almost too decent. My mother said, maybe I just needed a little spark to remember who I was before marriage dulled me. You're still young, Sylvie, she said. Don't let your life disappear into laundry. I laughed, but the word stuck. So when Evan suggested meeting at a downtown cafe, I agreed without thinking it through. It wasn't a plan to betray anyone. At least, that's what I told myself while picking out a dress that made me feel alive again. I didn't go there looking for trouble. I went there to prove something, that I hadn't vanished inside the life Daniel built for us, that I could still feel something beyond duty and routine. Looking back now, that small decision, coffee, conversation, curiosity, was the moment the ground started to crack beneath my perfect little world. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started as a harmless idea, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. I met Lorne again after almost 10 years. We used to date back when everything about life felt like it was still opening up instead of slowly closing down. When his message popped up on my phone, just a simple, "Hey, how have you been?" I stared at it for almost an hour before answering. I said I was good, busy with work and the kids, and he replied that he was back in town after a long stretch abroad. That was all it took. At first, it was just small talk, little bits of catching up that didn't mean anything. I told Daniel I was messaging an old classmate, nothing special. He nodded, uninterested, the way he always does when I bring up people from my past. He trusts me too much. That's the problem. Sometimes I wish he'd just question me, challenge me, show that something I do still matters enough to shake him. Instead, he smiled and went back to scrolling through the news on his phone. The morning I met Evan for coffee, I told Daniel it was a work meeting. I even put a notebook in my bag so it looked believable. I drove to the downtown cafe and saw Evan waiting near the window, the same lazy grin he used to have. It's strange how quickly old feelings can climb out of their graves. We talked about everything: jobs, family, travel. He told me he was single again, and I pretended not to care. He said I hadn't changed much, maybe just looked more grown, and that made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. We talked for nearly 2 hours. I kept telling myself I'd leave after one coffee, But every time I reached for my purse, he'd start another story. I don't even know who leaned in first. Maybe both of us. It was just one soft, short kiss, nothing that would mean anything if no one knew. It wasn't even passionate, just familiar, like revisiting an old song. I pulled away first, laughed it off, said something stupid like, well, that was closure. Driving home, I felt light, almost relieved. Like I had confirmed that whatever spark we'd had was gone, that Daniel really was the man I wanted. I convinced myself it wasn't betrayal, just an experiment, a married woman checking her emotional pulse. That evening, Daniel was at the table, helping Emma with her homework. He looked up when I came in, smiling, and said dinner was almost ready. I kissed the top of his head and told myself the lie again. It meant nothing. Then his phone buzzed. I saw his face change slightly as he read something, but he didn't say a word. He just set the phone down carefully and went back to helping our daughter. Later that night, when we got into bed, he turned to me and asked in this quiet voice, "Were you downtown today?" I froze but forced a laugh. "Why?" "Someone said they saw me." He nodded once, eyes still on the ceiling. I said it was a work thing, just coffee with a colleague. He didn't push. He said, "Okay," and rolled over. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I lay there awake half the night, staring at the dark, wondering who had seen us. The next morning, Daniel was distant. Not angry, not cold, just elsewhere. He still made breakfast for the kids, still packed lunches, still kissed me goodbye, but there was a space between us that hadn't been there before. I told myself it was just guilt making me paranoid. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I texted him, asking if everything was okay. He wrote back, "Yeah, just tired." I hated that answer. Tired meant he was thinking. Tired meant silence I couldn't control. That night, after the kids went to bed, he finally brought it up. "Someone texted me yesterday," he said. "They said they saw you with a man at the cafe." His tone wasn't accusing, just factual. I could have come clean then. Instead, I smiled and said, "Oh, that. It was Evan, an old friend. You remember me mentioning him from years ago. It was nothing, Daniel." He looked at me for a long time, and I could tell he didn't believe me. Not fully. So I added layers to the lie. I said Evan had been helping me with an HR presentation, that we just happened to meet downtown. I even threw in a detail about company policy to make it sound more real. "You know how strict my office is," I said. "If it was inappropriate, I'd lose my job." He nodded slowly but didn't speak. The silence was unbearable. I started crying, real tears, but not for the right reason. "I can't believe you'd think I'd do something wrong," I said, "after everything I do for this family." He apologized. That's the worst part. He apologized. He said he didn't want to make me feel accused. I hugged him, pressed my face into his shoulder, and whispered, "I love you." It wasn't a lie exactly, but it wasn't the truth either. Over the next week, I worked hard to control the story. I made sure to be overly affectionate in front of the kids. I posted a picture of Daniel fixing the porch light with the caption, "Best husband ever." It was for him, but also for everyone else. Proof that nothing was wrong. At dinner with our friends the next weekend, someone brought up seeing me at that same cafe. One of them laughed and said, "You two looked cozy, old flame or what?" I laughed louder than anyone else and said, "Please, I was just catching up with someone from work." Daniel smiled stiffly but said nothing. When we got home, he didn't go to bed right away. He sat on the couch staring at nothing while I changed into pajamas. I asked what was wrong, pretending not to know. He said, "You embarrassed me tonight." I told him he was being dramatic. I said he needed to stop caring what people think. I even blamed his insecurity. "It's not my fault if people misinterpret things," I said. "You're letting rumors get to you." He stared at me again with that calm, unreadable face that drives me crazy. He said, "Do you love me, Sylvie?" I rolled my eyes. "Of course I do. Don't start this again." He nodded once and went upstairs. I stayed on the couch scrolling through social media, feeling both triumphant and terrified. Over the next few days, Daniel stopped talking to me except about the kids. I called my mother and told her he was acting cold and suspicious. She said maybe he was insecure because he knew how magnetic I could be. "You just need to remind him you're the catch," she said. So I did exactly that. I started dressing better, laughing louder, posting more pictures of us, except he wasn't smiling in any of them. People noticed. My sister Laura pulled me aside after church and said quietly, "You should stop pretending everything's fine. He looks broken." I told her not to meddle. I said Daniel was overreacting to harmless gossip. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. A few nights later, we went out to dinner with friends again, trying to reset things. It was supposed to be easy, just food and laughter. But halfway through, one of Daniel's co-workers joked, "Careful, Daniel, or Sylvie might trade you for her ex." Everyone laughed, everyone but him. He placed his napkin down carefully, stood up and said to the table, "Excuse me." Then he walked out. For a moment I just sat there, smiling weakly, pretending it was no big deal. But the silence that followed was thick and awkward. Even the waitress avoided my eyes. I laughed too loudly again and said, "He's just tired, long week." But when I got home, the lights were off. His car was gone. And for the first time since that stupid kiss, I realized maybe I'd pushed him further than I meant to. The next morning, Daniel was still gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. The kids asked where he was, and I said he had to go to work early. I texted him twice, then 3 times. By afternoon, I told myself he just needed space. I'd seen men do this, cool off, then come back ready to talk. At work, I kept checking my phone until my coworker, Dana, leaned over and whispered that people were talking. She said someone had seen screenshots of me and Evan messaging, posted in a private group chat. My stomach flipped. I told her that was ridiculous, just gossip. But the pity in her eyes said she didn't believe me. By the end of the week, the whispers were everywhere. I could feel it in the way people lowered their voices when I passed by. Someone even made a joke in the break room about HR leading by example. I laughed along with them, pretending not to care, but inside I was shaking. I didn't know Daniel had started gathering proof, quietly, efficiently, like the engineer he is. At home, things were worse. He'd moved into the guest room. When I tried to talk to him, he said he had nothing to say yet. Yet scared me more than silence. I cooked his favorite meals, left notes in his car, texted him pictures of the kids, anything to soften him. He'd answer with short messages. "Thanks. Okay. Got it." My mother said to give him time. Men sulk, then they forget, she told me, but my sister Laura was harsher. "He's not sulking, Sylvie. He's planning." I told her she was being dramatic. One evening, Daniel came home late. I tried to hug him, and he stepped back. "Don't," he said quietly. "You're only sorry because people are watching now." That cut deeper than shouting would have. I said he was being cruel. He said, "You're the one who did cruel things and called them small." Then he walked upstairs and shut the door. The next morning, an envelope arrived at my work email. From a law firm. It was formal, polite, terrifying. "Please provide copies of joint account statements and recent correspondence relevant to household finances." I stared at it for minutes, reading the lines over and over. I told myself it was just a precaution, that he'd cool down once he saw I wasn't giving up. But deep down, I knew this was the start of something official. I forwarded the email to my mother and asked what I should do. She told me to ignore it. "He won't actually go through with anything," she said. "He's just trying to scare you." I wanted to believe that. That night, Daniel slept at his parents'. I texted him, "You're making a big mistake." No reply. When he finally agreed to meet, it wasn't at home. It was at a law office. I walked in wearing my best suit, thinking if I looked calm, I'd stay in control. Daniel was already there, sitting beside a grey-haired lawyer who barely glanced at me. The lawyer greeted me like a stranger. "Mrs. Anstral, thank you for coming. Mr. Anstral wanted to make sure this is handled respectfully." Respectfully? The word made my stomach twist. Daniel didn't look at me while the lawyer spoke. He just kept his hands folded. The lawyer listed everything as if reading a grocery receipt. Copies of text messages between me and Evan, screenshots from social media, witness statements from 2 people who had seen us at the cafe. My voice caught when I said those were private. The lawyer said calmly, "They were shared voluntarily by third parties." I looked at Daniel then. "You really collected all this?" He didn't answer. I said he was humiliating me for one harmless mistake. I said he was destroying our family because he couldn't handle a little attention from someone else. The lawyer interrupted. "Mr. Anstral is seeking an amicable separation with joint custody and division of assets according to state law." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "So this is revenge then? Legal paperwork for a kiss?" Daniel finally looked up. His eyes were steady, almost gentle. "It's not revenge," he said. "It's me accepting who you are." I wanted to scream. Instead, I crossed my arms and said, "You're overreacting." He said, "You've been saying that since the day you lied." He stood up and walked out first. I stayed behind, pretending I needed to reread the documents, but really, I just didn't want the lawyer to see me cry. At home, I tore through drawers looking for our bank cards. The joint accounts were empty, not stolen, transferred. He'd moved the money into a trust for the kids. I called his number, straight to voicemail. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen with the papers spread out, reading every word. The petition was simple, factual, no anger in it at all, just dates, statements, and proof. The calmness of it broke me more than shouting ever could. My sister came over after hearing from him. She looked at the stack of documents and said softly, "He's not being cruel, Sylvie. He's protecting himself." I said, "He can't do this. We're still a family." She shook her head. "You stopped being one the moment you decided to test him." I didn't reply. I just sat there staring at the papers, wondering when exactly Daniel had stopped being the villain in everyone's eyes, and I'd become the one no one wanted to defend. By the time Sunday came, I convinced myself I could fix things. I told my mother I was going to talk to Daniel face to face. No lawyers, no paperwork, just us. She offered to host a family lunch so it would feel safer. She even called Daniel's parents to invite them, pretending it was about keeping the kids' routine normal. I spent the whole morning rehearsing what I'd say. I'd apologize, but not too much. Just enough to sound humble without looking desperate. I wore the pale blue dress Daniel always said he liked. When he arrived, he didn't look at me. He greeted my parents politely, hugged the kids, and sat at the far end of the table. His father came in behind him, carrying a brown envelope. Lunch started tense but civil. My mother tried to keep conversation light. My father asked Daniel about work. I smiled, tried to chime in, but my words kept landing wrong. Finally, I took a breath and said, "I think we should talk about what's next. I want to fix this, for the kids, for all of us." Daniel didn't answer. He just nodded to the man standing quietly by the door, a man I hadn't even noticed until then. He stepped forward, introduced himself as Daniel's attorney, and handed me the brown envelope. The room went silent. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. My hands shook as I opened it. The words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage" stared up at me. Beneath it, pages of attachments, messages, photos, statements, all neatly labeled and dated. My mother gasped, my father dropped his fork, and Daniel's father muttered something about necessary steps. I looked across the table at Daniel. "You really brought a lawyer here? In front of everyone?" He said quietly. "I wanted there to be witnesses, no more lies about what was said." I said he was humiliating me. He said, "You did that to yourself." My mother started crying, begging him to reconsider. His father put a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "He's already given her more grace than she gave him." I turned to the kids who sat frozen, not understanding but sensing the tension. "Go play in the living room," Daniel told them gently. They obeyed without a word. I told him this was cruel, that he was tearing our family apart over one stupid mistake. He said it wasn't one mistake. It was a chain of them, all wrapped in excuses. My voice cracked. "You're doing this to look like the good guy." He stood, calm as ever, and said, "No, I'm doing this to stop being your villain." Then he walked out with his parents and the lawyer. I sat there in the echo of their footsteps, still clutching the papers. My mother knelt beside me, sobbing, but even she couldn't meet my eyes. My sister texted later, "He handled that better than you deserved." For the first time, I had nothing to say back. After that day, silence became permanent. The house felt hollow, stripped of sound. His side of the closet was empty within a week. The bank card stopped working, the car title disappeared from the drawer, and a letter from the court confirmed temporary custody arrangements. I tried calling him. He didn't block me. He just never answered. That was worse. People at work stopped gossiping aloud, but I could feel it in every quiet glance. HR irony. Everyone knew the HR manager was the scandal. I kept my head high, but my voice trembled when I spoke during meetings. Even Evan tried reaching out once, texting that he was sorry for how things turned out. I didn't reply. What could I say? He got to walk away untouched, while I was the woman who'd ruined her own life for a kiss. The kids spent weekends with Daniel. When he came to pick them up, he didn't cross the doorway. He'd wait by the car while they hugged me goodbye. I'd stand there waving, pretending not to shake. One Saturday, Emma asked if Daddy still loved me. I said yes, but she frowned, sensing the lie. My mother kept saying he'd come around eventually. "Men don't want to raise kids alone," she said, but Laura knew better. "He's done, Sylvie," she told me. "You broke something he can't rebuild." I spent nights drafting long messages, half apologies, half defenses. I'd type that he'd misunderstood, that I'd only wanted to feel alive, that I never meant to hurt him. Then I'd delete them before sending. What was the point? He'd made his position clear through silence and signatures. The divorce papers arrived 2 months later. No surprises, no cruelty, just details about property, custody, and accounts. I signed them on the kitchen table where we used to eat breakfast together. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos, birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings. In every picture, Daniel was smiling at me, not the camera. That realization hollowed me out. When the movers came, for the last of his furniture, I stood in the doorway and watched. They were polite, careful, quiet. When they left, I sat alone on the floor of the half-empty living room. The afternoon light hit the wall where our family photo used to hang. I thought about all the things I'd said, that it was harmless, that he was overreacting, that he'd never really leave. Every word I'd used to keep control had become the proof that I never had any. I don't even know if I cried. It was more like my body forgot how to make sound. Outside, I heard the car doors closing as the movers left, then silence again. That's how Daniel won, not through anger or revenge, but through calm finality. He never shouted, never cursed, never tried to destroy me. He just left me alone with the truth. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.